Alright, so we did a video similar to this a couple of days ago now, a few days ago now actually, and we went over the original idea and the original footage we had of Resident Evil 4. There's not a lot to go off of. It was very early builds, it was all scrapped and changed for the most part, and you know, we just generally went over what it was and what it could have been. And now we're doing the same with Resident Evil 5, and this one has a lot more going on that was publicly available to see. Resident Evil 5 basically went through constant changes all the way up till it released. They changed a lot of sections in the game, how the game works, story, massive story points. Like, this game just went through a lot, and as I mentioned in a video a couple days ago, Resident Evil 5 is obviously, again, as I mentioned in that video, one of my favourite games. So having it how it is now versus what it could have been is a huge difference. By the way, the footage you are looking at in the background is a kind of a progression of what the trailers showed of the game throughout their release, from the very beginning, first trailer, to the last trailer before launch. And then later on in the video we'll go over some of the concept arts that are there from the original ideas and things that may have been scrapped. So here we go, let's go through some of the details about RE5 and what's different now. I think the one massive, huge difference between what it was and what it is now is Resident Evil 5 was originally going to be just another single player game. Sheva was still present in the game, but she would only ever be an NPC that would appear later in the game, and she wasn't part of BSAA either. She was just a militia soldier fighting in Africa against the Majini, which are obviously the enemy types in this game. And you know, she was just there to help Chris throughout his kind of travels, I guess, in Africa. But she wasn't as big a deal back then as she is now. Obviously now she is part of the BSAA division in Africa, and is Chris's partner throughout the entire game. Another thing that's quite interesting about some of the original ideas I have for the game is with Jill. Now obviously in Resident Evil 5, Jill is presumed dead until you find out what happened to her. And what's interesting is, a small idea they had was, when Jill was reintroduced into the game, if you did certain things in certain ways throughout the game, and it does seem to suggest that you had a kind of an element of choice, Jill would die for real. Obviously that probably wouldn't be the canon ending, but there was a potential, due to actions in-game, that Jill would die for real as an ending to the game. So it does seem to suggest that the game would have had multiple endings, which is definitely interesting. Something I want to mention about the background footage you're seeing right now is there's a lot of enemies on the screen, and that is definitely not how many there are in the game now. They definitely seem to have an idea of having a lot of Majini fight you at once. There's even a move they do where they can grab you from behind, which would have been a really interesting mechanic, because you would not have a clue that was coming until they were right on your back. But yeah, a lot of Majini are in this original trailer. They also seem to be able to knock down higher up platforms you're on, but that's a lot of enemies, dude, so I'm glad they toned that down. Anyway, moving on to a few extra things that were going to be in the game, but just didn't make it into the game at all. Originally there was going to be these open areas of the game, and this will come up in the concept art I'm showing you at the end of the video. There was going to be large desert areas of the game that were quite open, and in the desert, in the sand, there were these Tyrant-like monsters you would fight, and we all know what Tyrants are. You know, they're in RE1, they're in RE2, 3, in the form of, you know, the original Tyrant in 0, the Tyrant in 1, Mr. X and Nemesis, you know, the big enemies, the big boys. There was going to be one in RE5 that was a sand monster, basically, that would come out of the sand at random and try and attack you, but not only did that monster get cut, but the entirety of the sand areas got cut from the game as well, which is a shame, because that would have been an interesting idea. Another key point in the story would have been that at some point throughout the game, Sheva would get kidnapped and taken by Wesker, and you would have to kind of go and save her, kind of like how you saved Jill in RE5 now, where she's kind of in the test tube. Well, you think she's in the test tube until you realise she's not there, but it would have been that kind of sequence of the game, but instead of looking for Jill, you would have been looking for Sheva, which is definitely, again, another interesting kind of direction to go in if you think about it now. One thing that was really kind of disappointing, I guess, that they didn't put in the game from the early builds is there was going to be originally T-virus zombies, like basically from the original 3 games, but you know, just zombies really. No Ganados, no Majini, just zombies. But the difference would have been they would have been fast versions, the slow kind of walking around zombies that you usually see in things. They would have been the fast ones. So that could have been interesting. Obviously the Majini are a bit more kind of aware There are a lot like Ganados from RE4, they kind of work together, they have weapons, they use weapons, they shoot you, they throw things at you, but these would have just been normal zombies. Not entirely just normal zombies throughout the entire game, but they would have made an appearance at some point. Yeah, another thing that got cut from the game, which is kind of still in the game now, in a way, but not as in-depth, is there was going to be a merchant, again like RE4, would have been more set up. It would have been a shop you would find every now and again, not just a guy near a lamp. It would have been a fully built shop with weapons and ammo in the back. Obviously you can talk to him, sell treasures for cash, and then buy ammo, guns and stuff like that. And what's cool about the merchant in RE5, well originally at least, is you would have been able to steal from him as well. Like you had the option to kind of just take shit. I'd imagine that would have some repercussions, whether he would fight you, or you just get less, or whatever. But they cut that out of the game completely, and now the merchant of RE5 is just the menu between chapters where you can sell treasures you found and buy upgrades for weapons and stuff like that. I would have much preferred a merchant again, but they did scrap the entire idea entirely, and then they brought obviously a merchant back with village in the form of the Duke. But with all that out of the way, now we're going to go over to the concept arts. There was quite a lot of them, but there's a few that kind of stood out to me that are a lot more interesting. So we're going to go through those now, bring them up on screen, and we can take a look and kind of discuss what they could have been. Alright, so first up we have Chris and Sheva. This is a very early concept of Chris and Sheva together. As you can tell, Sheva in this concept art is very different. This is her militia form, how she was originally. Again, she was going to be an NPC that helped Chris throughout the game, but would not have been a playable character at all, because original early builds of RE5 were single player only. So this is what Sheva would have looked like in that version. Next up is the T-Virus super fast zombies you would have encountered in the game. They would have come at you in fairly reasonable sized waves, but would have been easy to take down compared to a Magini. Again, they didn't use weapons, they didn't throw things at you or shoot you, they would just run at you and attack you like a normal zombie would. But obviously the difference being they were faster zombies. I'm not a fan of the whole fast zombies thing in anything really. I always prefer my zombies nice and slow. It's just they feel a bit more menacing when they're slow, because you think they're not going to catch you, but they definitely do. But the fast zombies are just usually kind of ridiculous, but that's just my personal preference. But yeah, this would have been the thing that would have happened at certain points in the game, in between Magini fights as well. This is a look at the Tyrants I mentioned earlier you would fight throughout the game. Again, these were more noticeably in the massive open sand areas and desert areas they were put into the game. And what they would do is kind of move through the sand and attack you at random. It was usually I think it was only the one thing they had, but it was like a Tyrant enemy, so obviously it was hard and it would appear out of nowhere, kind of the usual kind of Nemesis Mr. X type coming through walls, but instead it just jumps out of the sand at you. But that whole idea was scrapped, and the open environment, desert areas and levels were scrapped, mainly because of issues with cover. They were scrapped because, again, a lot of the Magini do kind of shoot you and throw things at you, so the lack of cover made it quite difficult. So they scrapped it completely, and the Tyrant along with it. This is another part of the large desert areas you would have got. This is just like a hollowed out ship. Remember in the Resident Evil 4 video I talked about reusing different things that got scrapped through concept? This gives me huge RE7 vibes. You know, a beached boat that's huge and just hollow, and you're going through it to find something specific. Obviously there is a boat sequence in 5, but it's at the very end, and it's definitely not a beached ship. So this idea may have kind of been added to 7 in a sense of a boat that is kind of run aground. But yeah, this would have been part of the open desert areas, and it did get cut. So this is not an area that appeared in the game, so it would have been interesting to see. Next up, this is a group of BSAA soldiers, along with Chris, fighting a bunch of El Gigante. Again, I forget what they're called in this game, but they are basically the same thing. This is an idea again that was completely scrapped. The only El Gigante you fight in RE5 is on the back of the Humvee, about halfway through the game, and it's a very stationary fight. But this seemed to suggest a lot of BSAA helping Chris take down a bunch of these things, which would have been pretty damn cool to see, I'm not going to lie. I always wondered what it would be like to fight more than 2 of these things at a time. I think that is the maximum we've fought at a time, and I think that's the RE4 boss fight in the lava room. But it would have been interesting to see that whole sequence play out, but again, it was indeed scrapped. And last but not least, this is the concept art for the merchant room. Again, it's more of a built-up shop than anything else, and there's weapons all over the place, ammo all over the place. Again, like I mentioned, you would have an option to steal from him, as well as just buying and selling. I don't know if it's me, but the concept art here does kind of vaguely look like the same merchant from RE4. Would have been interesting if it was the same guy, because he's a very mysterious character, and he does know the Duke, so maybe he's still alive somewhere. But either way, it does look very similar to him, but I'd imagine it would have kind of been the same thing. But again, they scrapped it, and now in RE5 it's just a menu between chapters, which is kind of disappointing. I think that's like my one kind of peeve with RE5, that the merchant got replaced by a menu. But it is what it is, you know, it happens. But yeah, that's going to be it. That is a lot of information, and that's not all of it. That's just kind of the main things I wanted to kind of throw out of all the information we got. Some of the things that interest me more than most of the things I've mentioned is the single player, the merchant idea being completely scrapped and changed into a menu. I still to this day don't not get why that was made, because people love the merchant, so having him come back and have him be a bit more, I don't know, explored in terms of a background standpoint would have been pretty interesting. The normal zombies and the Tyrant also really do interest me. I understand why they kind of wanted to probably step away from that, because it had been done a lot. The running zombies is interesting. I do feel like that's kind of transferred now to Village, because the Lycans are quite fast, and they do kind of behave like zombies. Obviously, some do shoot you, but the ones with like weapons usually are pretty fast. So maybe that's kind of where that idea went. But either way, let me know what you think of what Resident Evil 5 could have been. Like I said, I really like Resident Evil 5 that we've got. I think it's really, really good. But some of these ideas do really kind of open your eyes to what it could have been. But let me know your thoughts anyway. But thank you for watching. Remember to leave a like on the video, and I'll catch you all tomorrow.